Welcome to the Kent Lapp Podcast.
Great. Welcome back to the podcast.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So, Planet of the Humans. How about we start there?
Wow.
What did you think? By the way, thanks for texting that to me. You recommended that documentary, and it was not on my radar at all. So apparently, this has been out since, was it 2019? Actually.
Yeah.
By the way, I don't know if you knew this, but YouTube took it down for, I think it was like 12 days last year. Yeah, it was for some weird reason YouTube took it down. And then, of course, they kind of pressed charges or whatever, had them like revisit it, and then they re-released it or let it go back out on YouTube.
Yeah.
But YouTube censored that documentary. But it was full-length documentary, totally free on YouTube.
Yeah.
And it was really great. Thanks
That's
for
really
recommending
scary.
it.
That's really scary. Our society is built on the principle of freedom of speech and expression, and science relies on that. People being able to speak freely about their science, even if it's contradictory to popular opinion. And now, all of a sudden, we find ourselves in a society where, you better not be for or fight for a cause that's unpopular. I mean, we saw recently where certain law firms were attacked for defending certain people. I mean, last I checked, you're supposed to be entitled to legal representation. That's how we safeguard our rights, our institutions, and so now if something is not fitting the narrative, then we're gonna take it down. And I think it should be a reason to have it up so that there's
Yes.
a dialogue about it.
Yes.
That's unfortunate. I did not know that fact.
Yeah.
That's
No,
very sad. I see stuff like that all over the place.
Oh, it happens all the time.
By the way, thank you for the cigar.
Do you like it? Yeah. That was from Jason Rigel from Guidance Whiskey. It's
Yeah.
good cigar. So, what do you think of that documentary?
So I thought it was very good. I was surprised, but there's a lot of pieces of information along there they have learned from just investing around some of those themes, and just how much quartz, for example, goes into producing batteries, how much coal goes into production, how much productivity we really get out of these plants. And so I was very surprised that they didn't get into the technical details, but they covered a wide array. And I think that it just shows that we're not taking the time to find out the validity and efficacy of some of these things before we go ahead and implement them.
Yep.
Some countries have, and some countries that are very good at using some of these technologies, but they realize the limitations. It's surprising. Some of it is very counterintuitive. So, for example, I've learned from researching the topic that actually the more solar you generate on a grid, even though solar is very cheap, actually the more expensive the energy is on that grid, because you have to have all that standby power. So there's actually, you would think like, oh, the more I produce, the cheaper it gets. No, because that means you have more standby power. So there's a lot of things like that, and it doesn't mean that the technology is useless or can't be used. I think that certainly when you have places like LA with the pollution problems, the lack of rain during the summer months, having cars that are on battery can kind of reduce some of that smog and so on. But you're creating that problem somewhere else. So we have to have a more wholesome solution, not just a piecemeal.
Yes.
And it's also the things that we fall for. Like, I remember one time I was renting one of those golf cart things that take you from place to place downtown. And, the lady driving it thought that I was a tourist, I let her think that. So she was giving me an introduction to the city. It was kind of fun. And it would go by.
This was in Nashville?
Yeah, in Nashville. And we go by the Music City Center, and she goes on to tell me that the whole thing is powered by solar panels on the roof. And of course, I knew better because I was involved in the project. I invested the capital for the project. I know how much money we paid NES to put in the electric grid. But now all you have to do is hang up a couple of solar panels and tell people, "Oh, I'm running off solar," and I
Yep.
mean, so it's kind of funny. They reminded me of that story they told where Elon Musk said he's going to run this factory
Yeah.
on solar panels,
Yep.
but he's got this massive substation just to cater for his power plant.
Yeah, that's in
So
use, by the way. He doesn't have any plants that are totally run on solar. I mean, they're all hooked up to
I mean,
electricity, and it's a
yeah,
massive substation
yeah.
to run this plant. And by the way, I should have mentioned this for those that haven't seen Planet of the Humans. It's free on Netflix. It's a full-length documentary, and it talks about how basically that, quote unquote, renewable energy, particularly solar and wind, it's not so renewable after all. And it's not, at least how we're using it right now, it's not the answer, because those things take fossil fuels to create a massive amount. You look at these wind farms, now you are having, like, you're shearing tops of mountains, you're taking forests down, you're changing like miles of the topography, like in a desert, to put in these massive solar farms, those types of things. And you're still using fossil fuels to get it all created, and it doesn't last forever. These things only last for a couple of decades at best, and then they stop functioning. Then you have to tear them down, rebuild, and that takes new fossil fuels. Furthermore, they take fossil fuels to run. So, like that solar plant, and by the way, Andrew, if you could pull that up, the Ivanpa, I don't know how you pronounce it. Ivanpa?
Yeah, I didn't
Ivanpa,
catch
the
that.
solar factory, it's massive in the desert. And they but so the film investigates that, but then it also
You're talking about
investigates.
the one that uses natural gas to heat the water.
Yes.
So then the solar panels keep it hot. Whatever.
Yes.
So without the natural gas, you just can't
Exactly
run the
right.
thing.
Yes. So, and I want to come back to that because that's kind of an interesting project. But to wrap up sort of what the film's about, so it's about solar and wind and how it's not so sustainable, renewable after all. And then it talks a lot about biomass, which apparently was or is still lumped in with renewable energy, which is basically cutting down a bunch of trees and burning them for energy, which doesn't seem like a very sustainable solution either. But interestingly, it talks about the connection in there between environmentalist groups and corporations and billionaires and people with power and money that are kind of tied in with these environmental groups. It's fascinating. What the interesting thing is, right before you got here, we mentioned Planet of the Humans, and Andrew hasn't seen it yet, but it's been referred to him, and he probably will watch it. However, he was like, Michael Moore is involved, and it doesn't sound too interesting, might not watch it. But Michael Moore takes a different position on this film. I mean, usually he's very sort of left and liberal, right? But the kind of the talking points of this film doesn't fit that left and liberal narrative so much when it comes to
Well,
environmental stuff, correct?
it does fit the idea that we want clean air and clean water and so on. We just don't want to have it fake. We want to have a fake solution that only 20 years down the road, whatever. And
Yes.
so I don't know why the liberals, or what you're saying, the activists wouldn't want to hear that. Why wouldn't they want the truth? But
Yes.
maybe their motivation needs to be in question. And we see a lot of these organizations are actually, as the film points out, are backed by some of the biggest names in the industry, and we've seen it even on the investment side. Where people are being sold different ways to look at fossil fuels and ratings and so on. So I think that it should be interesting for everybody. Why wouldn't you want to hear it, even if you disagree with it?
Yeah.
You should hear it, and that's one of the unfortunate things that in our society all of a sudden is that we don't want to hear views that don't agree with ours, and I think that's just ridiculous. If all you
Yeah.
ever heard was views that agreed with yours, what would you learn?
Exactly.
I mean,
What's the point of
how do
having the
we test
discussions?
things? How do
Yes.
we, so of course, my interest in the field is not just because I like clean air and water, but I also, from an investment standpoint, I want to know what the investment implications are, because I don't want to invest in things that eventually become obsolete, and I didn't realize that I need to have a terminal value of zero.
Mm.
That's kind of the interest there, but at the same time, you know, as a person living on the planet, I also want clean air and clean water.
Totally.
But
I
I
totally agree.
also I don't want to pay more for my gasoline or my natural gas if where the money is going is just creating another fake solution that's going to create a bigger problem down the road. You know?
Yes.
And I think if you're going to watch this Planet of the Humans, I think that Bill Gates also has some really interesting talks on YouTube around this topic. And let me tell you, we give nuclear energy a bad rap. Nuclear energy can be very clean. We've gotten to a point where we don't need huge rods. That they don't have to be as radioactive. There's a lot of technology there. We have technology that can enable these things to basically shut themselves down, and so we don't have the old technology where you have a meltdown situation where basically they rely on gravity to make the thing come to a halt. So literally, engineers can get up off their chairs at the plant and go home, so their lives are not in danger. And the plant, just by gravity, will shut itself down. So we need real solutions, not make believe things. I think that it's important for all of us to talk about these things.
You mentioned paying more for power to try to have like better things for the environment, but that doesn't actually check out because you're just burning the fossil fuel, maybe not in your car, but you're burning it at the factory to create these solar, because these solar factories, they're using fossil fuels to fire up and create and everything like that.
It seems to me like somebody's just created a better mousetrap to get our money. It has nothing to do with the clean environment. It's just a better mousetrap. It has a green label, and now here it is. So that's not the kind of solutions. I would hope that we will live in a society that's a little bit more advanced than that.
Yeah.
We can actually have real solutions to problems, not just fake solutions to make somebody else rich.
Yes.
And to me, a lot of the stuff in the energy space is just a facade. That all of a sudden I can pollute as much as I want and buy some carbon credit from somebody, and all of a sudden I can advertise that I'm green. Well, how did I? What are you talking about?
Yeah. So the way that would work is, and by the way, I heard someone say recently that to run an electric car actually uses more carbon dioxide. It releases more carbon dioxide into the air than not the running of the car,
Right.
but the everything that goes into getting
Right.
the car built and then supplying the power to your house, which then feeds the car. So the actual driving of the car obviously is a lot cleaner with an electric car. But that whole process, it actually emits more carbon dioxide into the air than just running a regular car. I don't know if that's true.
That's not a rumor. So my understanding is that the carbon footprint of a Tesla is much higher than a comparable gasoline engine. Okay, you have to drive the Tesla for around 130 or so thousand miles. Don't quote me on that number. I don't have it right. Somewhere around that, and they break even.
Oh, wow.
Okay, that's my understanding.
Okay.
And again, is it a perfect science of how they're looking at how much carbon emissions and environmental damage you're creating when you mine for the quartz and so on and so forth. And then you keep in mind most of the technology that goes into the combustion engine is steel, and you have glass and other products. Just you don't have the battery. That's the biggest difference. The battery and so now you have to burn. You have to burn all that fossil fuel for a number of years. Until then, you're actually bad for the environment. Where the Tesla rolls off the assembly line really bad and needs a long life to get good with
That's
God.
fascinating. That's very fascinating. So
it doesn't sound like a huge step forward for mankind.
No.
Okay?
No.
But what Elon Musk is not here to defend himself, so maybe he would say that that's not his fault that the electricity is not being generated purely green.
Right.
Okay. So that's a fair point. Now, is it possible to generate just pure green energy without, well, that's to be debated. I mean, there's something to be said about this thing we call the sun that's constantly emitting this huge energy source that we can capture we were told for free.
Yeah.
But then it turns out that we need all this technology and all these things from deep down into the earth, quartz and
Yep.
this and that, and cobalt and different things just to get at it. And then so then maybe we should do it, but we should think about how to do it efficiently and think about the it was kind of disturbing in that movie to see all those old solar panels, just broken glass
Yeah.
laying on the ground. They don't even want to pay the money to clean it up. They just put new panels
Yep.
and next door.
Yep.
So that's not what I think of green sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree. And by the way, I'm a fan of electric cars. I mean, the
You have
Tesla I
one.
have, I have one. Yeah, and it's about 100,000 miles, so it's getting close to the point where it's going to return.
Yeah.
But what I like about it, and by the way, I'm all in on keeping this environment good
Me
and
too.
taking care of the earth. Like I'm all in on that for sure. When it comes to some of the climate change stuff, I just don't know. I don't really have knowledge in that whole area. I have heard the argument that it's carbon dioxide is not so bad. Plants need carbon dioxide. So having carbon dioxide emitting out into the air is not the worst thing ever. But I get the argument of, hey, we have a lot of people on this planet. We have a lot of businesses and corporations. As we go about industry and economy and what we do, let's take care not to ruin the earth. I'm 100% in on that. Back to electric cars, I'm a huge fan of electric cars just for the driving experience. Like your Mercedes, I'm sure that drives pretty great also. But there's something about the electric and how it's so quick and responsive and torquey and just like driving a luxurious, very fast golf cart. You know what I mean? And like that, I think it makes so much sense. There's so much about that makes total sense. Let's just keep in mind, this is the point of the film, that as you're going out there and buying these Teslas, if you're doing it for certainly what it sounds like the near term motive to save the planet, it's just not. It's not there. Let's do it. It's a great way to drive cars. It's a great way to but it's not as renewable or sustainable, I guess, as maybe we once thought.
And maybe it can be the right solution to specific problems as long as we understand the limitations. I mean, I can tell you the times that I've flown into LA in the middle of the summer, the air is very dirty. And so a lot of it is coming from the cars. And let's face it, it's like, I mean, you go into LA with, as you approach LAX, and all you see is streets, parking lots. They leave very little trees.
Yeah.
So not, maybe that's. But anyway, so my point is that maybe it is a solution for places like that to have an emphasis on that, so that they can. But they are just displacing the pollution.
Yes.
And that doesn't really help the overall planet, because I'm assuming that if we're going to save the planet, that means we got to have less emissions globally, not just in certain places.
Exactly.
Right?
Most certainly.
Yeah.
Andrew, can you pull up the Ivanpa Power, what's it called? Ivanpa Solar Power Facility in the desert. All right, so here we go. So if you scroll down on here, Andrew, and I don't know if you can enlarge it. I can barely read that text from here. There we go. Keep scrolling down. There was a portion down there on impact, performance. Yes, talking about what they export. Okay. Well, one of the things that keep going down a little bit here to the environmental impact. So somewhere I saw that, actually scroll down a little bit more, Andrew. Here we go. So this thing kills 3,500 birds in 1 year, and a lot of these bird deaths are from they fly. So the way this thing works is there's all these mirrors out in the desert, taking up 6 square miles, I think. So that's like the equivalent of like 2 miles by 3 miles, right? Or it's maybe 2.5 by 3, however that shakes out. But 6 square miles, that's a lot. And these mirrors reflect back up to a big tower that's holding water. And these mirrors use the sun to reflect up to this tower and heat the water, and that generates power. But they use fossil fuels to heat to turn it on in the morning, basically. Is that right?
Yeah.
And I guess the birds, when they fly by these mirrors, they just get roasted.
And I'm sure some of them are endangered. I mean, the odds are some of them are endangered, right? But nobody gives a damn.
Right. But no, they were like falcons. Like these are not like little blue jays getting roasted. Like they're falcons and like that type of thing.
Yeah.
Owls.
Somehow that's okay. And then also windmills are very notorious for also killing birds. I think now the new technology is to create some kind of a sound that would keep the birds away, similar to how some airports use that.
Hmm.
But let me
That
tell you, I
humans
mean,
can't hear, but birds
we,
can? A
well, I don't
sound that
know. I
humans
don't
can't
know.
hear,
Well,
but
there's
birds
no
can?
humans in the middle of
Yeah.
in the middle of a wind tunnel. You don't want to be anywhere near one of those howling sounds.
Howling sound from what? Oh,
The windmill turning. Like I've never heard one.
no.
It's like this. Maybe we can get an audio from the internet, but it's like, and you got 500 of these things going on.
Oh, wow.
It's wild. Yeah.
So if you happen to live close.
And so they have gears inside. They're very sophisticated, and in order to really get power, you have to sort of gear it down, meaning like have a lot of torque. So
Okay.
when you see one just spinning freely like this, it's not generating much. They got to be spinning so much that they gear down the torque, and then it starts to move like slowly, agonizingly, and that's when it's pulling a lot of energy. And
Oh.
it's really amazing. It's great technology, but they're huge, and and um, let me tell you that wind is not consistent, right? It doesn't blow consistently, and solar. I mean, not only do you have night and day, but you also have clouds and so on and so forth. So it doesn't mean you can't harness these things, but I think the time to vilify fossil fuels is when we have a substitute, and we don't have a substitute. So maybe we should be thinking. Maybe we were right all along to make cars burn more efficiently with cleaner mufflers and cleaner environmental systems. Maybe that was the right approach all along. And maybe things like the was it the Toyota? What is it called? That had the dual engine and
Prius?
Prius. Thank
Yeah.
you. That had kind of like could you know
That
gives you
had gas and
gas
electric,
and
didn't it?
electric, but you didn't necessarily have to plug it in.
Yes.
You could just it would charge while it's running. It's a tiny little motor, like 1.3 cylinders. Uh, anyway, so I'm not an expert on this topic, but it's really become obvious to me that we just can't buy the narrative that everybody wants to sell. And then what's really scary is as the movie digs into it, you find out that the anti Koch brothers and anti these companies would tell you, oh, we're anti those people because we want green energy.
Yeah.
But you find out that these very same people are behind the technologies
They are.
that, for the clean energy movement. So they don't care.
Because you would want people getting into air quotes clean energy if you owned, say, a mining operation that sells the quartz or whatever's needed for these batteries, right? Now you have a financial interest in America or the whole globe going green, so to speak, because everyone's going to make a whole bunch of batteries and they're going to need a whole bunch of quartz or whatever it is that you happen to sell.
Yeah. So it's managing risk for an investor. If I'm heavily into fossil fuels, I better get into on this act because as it ebbs and flows, I get to make money. So it's a
Yes.
diversification, really.
Yep. Okay. So there is one aspect here that I still don't fully understand. So if you could just walk me through it, I think hopefully I can get it. But it's this idea that the combination between solar and fossil fuel to generate electricity can make the per unit hour of that electricity generated more expensive because solar works great during the day, not so great on cloudy days, not great when it's snowing, not great when it's raining, and certainly not great at night. So solar is great when you have it, but you don't always have it. And you don't always have it. You know that night's built in everywhere. So to complement for that decrease in energy generated, you have to have fossil fuel to generate power when the solar is decreased. And to generate the amount of power, you kind of have like I think of it as like a mean demand of power, like a medium demand of power, day, night, however this works. A city kind of knows how much power they need to generate, right? So you install a bunch of solar panels. That's great. You have this power during the day or on sunny days, but then on off days and nights, now you have to use your more traditional source of energy, fossil fuels or whatever, to generate that power on the offset. The problem you run into is now you need the apparatus, the fossil fuels, the whatever you need that capacity to complement for when the solar capacity is down. The issue is, so now you need the same capacity, but you don't have the demand 24/7 on that capacity. So now you're in a situation where you have you need the same capacity, but you don't have the same demands on that capacity, which just means that your utilization of that capacity is no longer nearly as efficient. And so now you're paying more for electricity. Is that accurate? Is that a butchering of it? Do I not understand it at all? Can you talk me
So
through
no,
that?
I think that's accurate. There's you have to look at it from a number of perspectives. So let's say I'm the fossil fuel provider to the grid in this city. Have to build a plant that would supply enough power for the city in the middle of July when it's 100 degrees out and clouds all of a sudden move in. Okay, I gotta have enough. So I'm have to have 100% capacity to cover you. Okay, but then you're not gonna use me except when the solar is not working. So you gotta pay for my plant. I gotta amortize that cost, and you gotta pay for that other plant.
The
Okay,
solar plant.
the solar
Yeah.
plant, and then I gotta stand by with motors running and maybe wasting some electricity just so as soon as a cloud crosses, I have to put in power into this
Okay.
thing. Okay. So on one hand, I am now underutilizing this. Okay. But I still have to pay for the capital cost. Okay. And then I have to pay the capital cost of the solar. Now I'm getting very cheap solar, but I have this. So what happens is as the percentage of solar utilized in a certain area increases, the cost of energy, every unit actually goes up, not down, because now I'm not utilizing. There's more dead time here, so I'm getting the really cheap electricity from here, but I got to have more and more standby power that's not being utilized.
Yes.
Okay, and then it really gets ugly when you start to talk about, well, why don't I store the electricity that's generated when I don't need it to use later? Like, for example, in batteries, or there's places that pump it up to the top of a mountain to be stored in a lake and then released through hydro.
Electricity?
Yeah, that's a way no, you pump water. You got solar panels generate electricity.
Mm-hmm.
You use the electricity to run your pumps to
Mm-hmm.
pump water up a mountain. And then when you need it, you release the water down the mountain, like through like a hydro plant. So I think, matter of fact, Chattanooga has something similar to this.
Oh, I didn't know it was a
So,
thing.
but the loss is tremendous because now you pumped it up to pump it down. You're not generating more power going down than you would going up. So yeah, it is a battery, but it's a very bad battery.
It's very expensive
Yeah,
battery.
very expensive.
Yeah.
They you can use lithium and other things to store. Again, 30% degradation, in efficiency and so on. So now that's fine, except when you start to look at how much fossil fuels and damage to the environment we cause when we replace these things.
Yes.
And that's what the movie is really focused on. I mean, these
Yes.
things are not made out of magic dust.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. There's a real cost to that.
Yeah.
A massive cost to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just thought the
So did I
documentary
answer
was.
your question about
Yes.
I mean, it kind of makes sense when somebody explains. Somebody had to explain it to me, so I
Yep.
was like, "Huh? What are you talking about?" But now, again, going back to that movie, what about supposedly we had these plants we're going to use pulp and scrap wood from wood chippers and whatever, but you build the plant, you got to run it or you lose money. So now you go out and cut trees just to feed the plant.
Yeah,
Wait a
exactly.
minute, I thought we were supposed to be planting trees. What?
Yes.
So you mean to tell me when I give money to plant a tree, that little tiny thing, I'm also like cutting mature trees just to
Yes.
create electricity? Is this just because it's not what, coal or natural gas?
That to
I'm
me,
confused.
yes, that to me was the scariest part of the entire movie. That aside from just realizing that the corporations and the people with power and money have their hands in on both sides, so they could care. I mean, they could almost care less whether we go more green or whether we go more traditional because they're making bukus of dollars either way. But if they see the general public going to go more green, well, then, yeah, get on the front end of that and position yourself so that what they need to go green, they have to buy it from you anyway.
Yeah.
But one of the scariest, so apart from like the environmentalists sort of kind of being in bed with the people in power and whether they knew it or not, that was a little concerning because there's just this opportunity for a dual motive. And I mean, you'd like to give people the benefit of the doubt, but when big money's involved, you have to be aware of that. But the other concerning thing to me was, yes, these biomass plants. That great idea to burn scrap or dead animals. Why not if that generates power? But then the idea that we go out and cut down forests to burn, it seems ludicrous, to be honest.
While we're telling people to go plant trees.
Well, and also the trees is what processes the carbon dioxide in the air.
Right,
You know what I mean? So like, and just on that again, so this is I've heard. By the way, I'm not an expert on this stuff. I really don't know that much about it. But from what I have heard is when you go back, I don't know, a few decades and look at like satellite of the Earth, apparently we have more green going on right now because we're emitting this carbon dioxide, which is plant food. Our plants are doing great. The problem is we're cutting them down. So if we can leave our plants and trees intact to process this carbon dioxide, that would be a pretty good first step. But we're cutting down a lot of this stuff for biomass.
Yeah. So, Ken, I think you were being very kind to the energy producers by saying that they don't care whether we want the dirty fuel or the clean fuel. I think that's being very generous. I think that it's actually, we've gotten to a point where it's a game, and one is cheap fuel, and now we can sell you the other stuff and make more money off of you. I really think that it's not. I think it's naive to think that they're not making a lot of money on this because there's huge incentives. People want to be green. People want to do these things. So you can make. I mean, Goldman Sachs is trading carbon credits. Who's making the money in that shenanigan? I bet you it's Goldman Sachs.
Yeah. In other words, if you used to sell fossil fuel and now everyone's going to go green, that's great because you're still going to sell them fossil fuel and you get to sell them a whole bunch more stuff to create all of the necessary infrastructure for solar and wind. Yeah, that's
And you can sell green energy on one part of the planet where you may have been subsidized by somebody, or maybe it is easier to create solar energy in Africa, for example, and turn around and sell the credit to somebody else in a different part of the planet that needs that credit, so that they can offset the damage that they did.
okay. Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah,
think
that makes sense.
we discussed, like, in the I think you and I talked about this in the most recent quarter of Tesla's earnings. They had $397 million from revenue from carbon credits. So they get that. They can sell those because they're generating an energy efficient vehicle. But we just found out that is only energy efficient if you drive it into the ground. But
it's such a great business model. I mean, kudos to Elon Musk, I mean, by the way, who's writing the check for the 370 million?
the people that need the credit because they're polluters, so they can advertise, that we're carbon neutral. So anytime you want to offset whatever it is you're doing, they calculate. You got companies, consulting firms now that go in, they calculate what's your carbon footprint, and then you can go find somebody that has I don't know, a non-carbon footprint,
Okay.
and buy these credits from them.
So
but
Group A is emitting more carbon. Their carbon footprint is higher than, but someone's got to be monitoring this than the EPA would like him to be, or
Right,
whoever,
right.
right? But then over here you have seemingly Party B, whose carbon footprint is under average or whatever, and so they can sort of trade credits, if you will. And then, in this scenario, Party B, being Tesla, they're paid. Party A is penalized. They're paying a tax for what they're emitting.
Yeah.
Party B is the recipient of that tax, even though they're emitting just as much, if not more, in the short term.
That's what we just found out, that the car rolls out with a bigger footprint. So it's very
now
confusing.
it seems like a very weird
Right?
scam.
Right. This scam. So is the environment the priority here? I don't think so. It doesn't seem like it.
Yeah.
Not and this goes on all up and down the energy infrastructure. Like, you have subsidies to put ethanol into your fuel tank, and now there's very limited supply of so you actually generate credit that you have to sell, that Exxon and people that refine this product have to buy, and it keeps getting bid higher and higher and higher because there's a limited supply. So it's just another way for somebody to make money, but I don't see the connection between that and making the planet cleaner. I have
Yes.
no problem with people making money. I think probably a good solution to this will involve some ingenuity, and that will take capitalism to come up with it. But so far, all I see is people making money, not necessarily having the planet in mind.
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of what the whole film is about.
Yeah.
Is we thought we were doing all this stuff because it's so great for the planet. As it turns out, it's not. And so now, why are we doing it?
Yeah.
Yeah, which is kind of to your point.
Yeah. And then let's not trash natural gas. It's not a perfect fuel, but it has certainly a lot more, a lot better for the environment, a lot cleaner than coal and other things that it substituted. So, even though we pulled out of the Paris Accord, we have actually exceeded the benchmark set in the Paris Accord as a country because of the natural gas taking over the coal plant. So we didn't have all the costs associated with the Paris Accord, but we still had the benefit of cleaning the environment. So I don't know that we should be trashing something until we have a better alternative, and I think that's critical, because I don't, it's not perfect, but there's a difference between drilling a small hole in the ground and extracting natural gas, than bulldozing mountains and going deep into the earth with heavy equipment to take quartz out and coal out to burn.
Yes.
So it seems like a cleaner solution.
It does. By the way, does natural gas only come from fracking?
No.
Okay.
But
fracking does.
It has enhanced the output tremendously.
Fracking has, right?
Yeah.
So obviously fracking has nothing to do with coal. You can't frack coal.
Yeah.
But the fracking technology, which is it 10 years old? I mean, it's
Oh no, it goes back to the 80s. But
does it?
It's just a matter of the cost. You can invent something, but the cost is prohibitive, and so it took years for people to get to a point where it can be done efficiently, quickly, and kind of on a competitive basis. Um, but at the end of the day, a lot of fracking is really for oil, not gas.
Okay.
I'm not saying they don't frack for gas. They do, but it's so cheap right now that it's just not profitable.
That's right.
So a lot of the gas we're getting from fracking is a secondary product of fracking for liquid fuel.
Okay. Yep. And yeah, I mean, I know fracking has, like, there's some infrastructure needed for that too. Where you have some, you make your well area and you're hauling in gravel for that and you're setting it up. Like, there's still an impact there for sure.
Absolutely.
But you're right. You have this well that goes down. You need water, and then you have retention ponds for this water, and
they use a specialized sand that only comes from certain parts of the
right.
world to blast through. So it can't be just a round piece of sand. It just So there's technology involved. I mean, it's not, like I said, it's not a perfect fuel, but when you look at what it takes to manufacture a solar panel, it's very pollution driven. So I wouldn't. I wouldn't sort of. You can't just put blinders on. See, I see you. I don't see. I see no evil. You got to see it for what it is.
Yes.
That's the only way to really solve a problem. I always thought we're supposed to have like a scientific approach to solving problems. It's like go in with a clear mind. And now we see just people wanting to just say, oh, everybody, oh my God, you're a denial. You're science. What is it? What's the word that they use?
No science.
No, you are a I'm sorry, I forget, but it's something to do with being a denier, science denier. It's like you're denying the fact that the planet is warming.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I'm curious what that term is.
Yeah.
Is it
global warming something denier or
Okay.
I don't know.
Climate
Anyway,
change
so
denial?
this goes into the discussion about Al Gore saying that 97%, both I think Al Gore and I think President Obama said that 97% of scientists agree that global warming is a problem and it is man-made. And it turns out now that they go back and to find these scientists, it's very hard to come up with a 97% number.
Yes.
And some of these scientists are not interested in laying blame; they're interested in research. And so now we're managing science so we can win an argument, so we can drive society in a certain direction.
Yes.
Which we don't even know where the facts are yet.
Yes.
And there's another topic that's worth discussing. It's in this whole kind of like it's unanimous in the scientific community. There's not much unanimous in the science.
Yes.
We do know the globe has been warming for a few hundred years. Some of it may be man-made. We don't know if it's reversible. Seems like about 30% or so of scientists believe it's mostly man-made and reversible, and the rest are somewhere in between.
Oh, wow.
I don't know. So again, I'm not an expert on this. I think it's worth discussing because you see the assumption out there is that there's only one solution, and
That's right.
to get rid of my Mercedes and drive your Tesla.
Yeah. Yeah. Which but I'll trade you.
Not
since
gonna
I'm
happen. Although I have to say, it does bother me, as a internal combustion person that grew up and wanting to own a V8 or a Mustang or whatever. It really saddens me to see that these electric cars are just blowing away everything that's internal combustion. So
yeah.
So it's sad,
You mean like blown away as in like speed?
Yeah,
Off the line speed?
Yeah.
Well, you're
lighter.
never going to be able to beat it,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
It's crazy.
internal combustion can't. You can't compete with that because electricity is so torquey. Like, I don't know how you're ever going to beat an electric car with a
Yeah.
gas engine.
Yeah, I don't know.
You know?
I just remember my electric cars when I was a little kid, and I used to be able to hold them with my finger.
Yeah.
They weren't very torquey.
Well, Tesla's working on
What happened?
Tesla's working on a roadster that is going to use some rocket compulsion to get it off the line even quicker.
My God.
It's so quick. Like, because even if you have something be all-wheel drive, and let's say it has the biggest battery imaginable, and it's super torquey and super powerful, and you can get off the line as quick as you want, there's still the reality of four wheels in the ground, and at some point, those wheels are going to spin if you have so much torque on them. So, obviously they know that at Tesla, and so they're thinking, well, how can we still make it quicker than the wheels will allow us? Well, the one way you can do that is to have a little bit of rocket propulsion assistance, and that'll get you off the line even quicker. What is clean cool, though? I don't understand that, because that's talked a lot about this last year. What's the difference between clean coal and dirty coal or whatever? Like, what's clean coal?
So I don't know. It depends what you're referring to. So there are some coal. There's coal that creates more pollution. That's primarily what's in Kentucky, and I'm not an expert on it. I don't know And then there's that aspect of it. Not all coal is equal. Some needs more processing. But then the other side of that is you do have plants that burn cleaner, in that they have systems designed to carbon capture or clean the air before it's spewed back out. So I think that might be what's called
clean coal is more about the plant and how the plant works.
Yeah, and the inputs matter because some coal has different, just like steel, it has different ingredients
I
in
see.
it, and so it could be dirtier. But I think specifically what you're asking about is about the plant and capturing the carbon emissions and so on. And I mean, there are ways that now that they can actually capture the exhaust, the final dirty exhaust, and actually pump it back underground, and that's considered carbon capture.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, which is an
but
interesting.
what's wild about this is we have to look at this problem as a planet, and while we're sitting here, shutting down this and doing that, China is building coal plants by the dozens every year. So it's like, what's this point?
Mm-hmm.
If it's not a global solution,
Exactly.
what are we doing?
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Wouldn't they say, well, everyone just needs to do their part and we can do our part and eventually we'll get around to China? Like, is that what they would say? I mean, because the
I
people in
mean,
power would know this is a global thing, right?
but I mean, math would suggest that if I'm doing a little bit less and they're doing a lot more, I haven't made any progress.
Right.
Am I too slow for this situation or what?
Yeah. No, no. I think that's. It's just I'm trying to like argue from what's their reasoning, and I don't know much about the Paris Accord.
Well, I
but
mean, I think what it looks like to me is that they have control over policy here and they don't in China.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just that
Yep.
simple.
Yep. So then you put policy in place here because you have control, but it comes at an expense, and we, the taxpayers and so forth, are paying for.
And the Paris Accord tries to increase that reach, take the control here and increase that reach by creating subsidies to incentivize other people to do better.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, we would end up paying more for our energy so that someone else can build a clean energy plant somewhere else, so that they can then build a factory to build things cheaper than we can, so that we lose our jobs
Mm-hmm.
and buy it from them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It
So
all makes sense to me.
what's your take on this? Is Friday the is it the 13th?
13th.
Oh, it is Friday the
Yeah,
13th. Oh,
13th.
welcome. Hopefully nothing goes
Wasn't
wrong
it
here.
like how many Friday the 13th are there? Wasn't it like the 13th last time I was here?
It might have been. They come around a lot. I don't know if it was when you were on, but it was funny because when I was scheduling, this day, it was like, texting someone like Friday the 13th. It was like, oh. Then I
think
forgot
you
about it
asked me
until
if
now.
I'm okay with that. Like
Yeah, I
I'm
did.
gonna
Yeah.
fall, like I'm gonna fall down the steps or something. No, can I hide at home?
Well, I'm good with proceeding if you are. So it's Friday the 13th. It looks likely that Biden's the next president. Would you say that's a 99% certainty or 80% certainty? Where do you kind of fall there?
I think it's much higher than 80.
Okay.
I don't,
But somewhere between 80 and 100.
yeah.
Not much hope for Trump at this point. You would agree with that?
I mean, unless they find some systemic fraud on a scale, it's very difficult to tell, who's saying what anymore. I haven't seen anything that there appears to be people who vote that are dead, but that happens all the time.
Mhm.
So I don't know.
Cats vote. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
this is
Can cats vote? Can my cats vote?
absolutely. There's been cats that have voted.
Wow.
Probably even dead cats that have voted. But
Okay.
but
The
you're
other-
right. I'm not necessarily saying that for
Some
this
people are
election. That's
making
always been that
claims
way.
that some people are making claims that there was a systemic effort to go after people that moved out of a jurisdiction to vote on their behalf. That could be really interesting if there's any truth to that, because there could be some big numbers there.
Mhm.
But I see this as a positive because aren't you curious if, like, see, I work for Metro and I know some of the people involved in the election commission and all that, and they're very dedicated people. So, they take stuff seriously.
Yep.
Believe it or not, they want democracy to work. But I always wonder about Philadelphia and Detroit. I mean, you hear the history,
Yeah.
so so let's find out.
Yeah.
What a way to find out. Is it really, solid? If it's solid, it stays up in court. Then my faith in our electoral system would increase substantially. So I see a positive in this.
So assuming Biden's president, what do you see coming on the green policy front?
So, look, I'm not an expert in the area, but I do think that there are some things he can do by executive order, just like Obama did, and then Trump reversed, such as what you go in and out of the Paris Accord, and then there's other things like what federal lands, what's allowed on federal land. So there's a lot of room for that. And then when you run the executive branch of the government, you have power over setting, gasoline emissions and clean air. So there's a lot you can do. So it'd be interesting to see how far he goes. Um, I think that the politicians underestimate the effect of these things on people. And as we saw with the Yellow Vest movement in Paris, which was triggered by an increase on the gasoline tax in Paris, it affected people that are working class people, not the rich, not the people that are benefiting from all the wonderful stock market going up, but people that have to get to work every day and balance the budget at the end of the month. And I think that that populist movement and that Trump benefited from, um, he didn't create. He's not that smart. I think it was just there and he captured it. But he was smart enough to kind of see it, read the tea leaves, so to speak, just like
Mm-hmm.
Ronald Reagan did. And let's see where the direction of moving from a heavy reliance on government oversight and regulation to free market. He saw that because we kind of had reached a tipping point, and I think that Trump benefited from a tipping point. So people, I think, start to understand now how their job is affected by these regulations. And while I want consumer friendly policies and I want um, Wells Fargo and all these other banks to have consumer friendly policies and whatever, you apply it across all industries and it has a dampening effect on productivity and profitability and job creation. And companies are already in a mode of cutting expenses to make more money off the same amount of sales. That's been going on for years, or low growth, right? Especially in traditional industries and traditional economies, old school businesses and so on. So it's going to be very challenging to have a robust job market and increase in wages and so on if we're also, so we'll see. I mean,
If we're also regulating heavier and taxing heavier.
tax heavier, regulate heavier, and then you increase the. Anytime you have to comply with the law, it's costing you something. There's
Yep.
more regulation, so you tend to export things because if somebody else lets me pollute, why am I going to worry about it? And half the time, it's not even the company doing it. I can just outsource it, have somebody else make it. I don't know how it's being made. Just bring it to me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, does Apple really pay attention to what's going on in some of their factories? I mean, we've seen some of the stories.
Yep.
So
Okay, so then I wanna hear more about global trade. This is something, and even let's get into relations with China, although the topics can be separate. We were talking about this. Oh, I don't know. It's probably several Saturdays back now, right? My wife was out of town. You were over at the campfire.
yeah,
Um, so global trade, a country that sends goods out, of course, that's exporting. When you bring goods into your country, that's importing. Countries may want to be involved in this if, for example, we're making wine efficiently here in America, but our sweaters are not so efficient. But another country, I don't know what other country would make sweaters. Let's just say Brazil. They make sweaters super efficiently, but wine maybe not so much. And so we want to just be like the wine guy and they're the sweater guy and we trade, and that's just better for everybody because we can make it more efficiently here. They can make sweaters more efficient. Now we're trading. Like that's why you would do global trade.
yeah. I mean, I think that's about specialization. Works when neighbors next to each other specialize. I make milk, you make cheese. I buy the milk from you. I make cheese, so you can specialize in making milk. I specialize in making cheese or whatever. Or I could be making, I could be growing cows while you're growing something else. It works the same way with countries, and sometimes, uh, you know, geography and resources dictate certain strengths and weaknesses, even the finance. So, for example, it doesn't make sense for farmers in northern England to try to make wine to sell to southern France, and for the southern France to try to raise sheep for wool and
Yes.
sell it to northern England where it's abundant sheep. So you specialize in what you're good at and you import what you're not. That's how it's supposed to work. And first of all, again, back up a second. Globalization and trade are very good for all humans. As a matter of fact, it's really bought standard of living. Uh, any country that's involved in trade and what have you. I mean, even countries that are not known to be capitalist, whatever, exporting oil out of Saudi Arabia changed the lives of Arab countries.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, exporting out of China has uplifted the lives of many Chinese. There are, there's about 1 billion Chinese, but 300 million of them, roughly about the same number of American people, live lives like you and I. They're considered middle class to upper class. I mean, they're really there is a 300 million Americans, sorry, Chinese in China are living very similar lives to the 300 million Americans living in America, but they have 600 million. They're still, you know, well below, the poverty line. Now we have that problem too, but it's not as big a percentage.
Mm-hmm.
So exporting brings up everybody. You have productivity, so you have efficiency, and then people get paid, so then they can afford to buy things, and they start to buy toothpaste and toothbrush, and they start buying, more prepared food and so on and so forth. And then next thing you know, they're consuming cars and so on and so forth, and it just goes on and on. So consumption grows, and therefore, more demand grows, and so on and forth. That's how it's supposed to work.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, you only need two things for this. You need capital and labor. And you take the capital, and how do you get capital? Capital is saved. So somebody's saving somebody's capital, and you apply it to labor by educating it and building factories and training it, and you have output. And that's basically how you create GDP.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the problem that we have today um, is that for about 300 years prior to about 1950, the problem that existed throughout the world was actually shortage. Right? You had shortages of everything. You've heard famines. You've heard. I mean, the Bolshevik Revolution was about the government taking land from the farmer. You go everywhere. Socialism is essentially, basically, about taking everything and putting it in the hands of central control, so that the central power can control the production and who gets the wheat and who gets the grain and so on and so forth. So we had a history, roughly 300 years, 250 years of shortages. Um, and then all of a sudden, that just completely changed. So we have the opposite problem. We have in multitude, and that's both capital and production. We have more capital than we know what to do with. That's why capital assets keep getting invested up, and Chinese are saving, Americans are saving, investments are going up, and so we have plenty of capital and we have plenty of productivity. So wait a minute, so one of the arguments you hear out there is if they just invest more and we'll have more, but in order to invest, you have to have a consumer. And right now, the problem facing the world is consumption. We are able to produce more than we can consume.
Hmm.
And what does that mean? So this problem, even though it started in 1950, really became very clear in the 1970s. And because we just didn't have enough uh, demand for what we were doing to continue to grow. So we started to lever the economy so people can consume more than they can afford. So borrow from future demand to spend today, which kind of creates only so much you can do with that. But apparently we can keep going. I don't know when it ends, but
Yeah.
Um, and then countries around the world started to rely on export as a way to solve it. And this works out really well if you're an exporter, like Germany, for example. Since 1999, this has worked out really well for Germany. cheap currency. Once they entered the EU, the Deutsche Mark strength was gone, so they had cheap currency, so they could continue to export, and their currency stayed put. See, in the real world, if it was you and I trading, you had your currency and I had my currency, and you specialized in X and I specialized in Z, and we traded. If you were beating me at trade, meaning that I am buying from you more than you are selling to me, which essentially means I am borrowing money. My banks are creating debt, or somehow, in order to balance my books, I'm borrowing. Okay. So if that's the case, then what would happen is your currency value would go up and my currency would go down.
If let me just pause you for 1 second. If you and I are different countries and I'm selling you more than I'm buying from you, if I'm selling you more than I'm buying from you, my currency is going to go up
In value,
and yours is going to go down.
because you're accumulating my money and I'm having to go borrow more.
Yes, I see. Okay.
Okay. And so this is how it's supposed to work. And unfortunately, people say, "Oh, it's a free system." It's not a free system. Countries are controlling their currency. So by Germany, for example,
Just pull
entering
that mic close to you.
by Germany entering the EU, they were able to keep their currency cheaper than it would be otherwise. Okay, so they can continue to sell their product, right?
Mm.
Same way with China. China can keep its currency low. They manage their currency so that they can continue to sell at cheap prices. At some point, it's supposed to reverse, but that doesn't happen when you're controlling the currency valuation. Now, there's other reason it doesn't happen, which is that, of course, their standard of living is also they have a lot more to go. That's another factor. Another factor that affects it too is that they make investments for the sole purpose of creating jobs, which essentially means displacing jobs from the West to their country so that they can feed their 1 billion people. They still need to have more jobs. They have people moving from the countryside to the cities seeking jobs. So this creates a lot of imbalances, and people suffer from it. This is understood. It's not a secret. It's not a theory. It's not being debated. You have winners and losers in this, and even the most pro uh, free traders will tell you that you have winners and losers, and you have to kind of see how you're going to solve these problems. And typically, they throw things around like job retraining and whatever, whatever, what have you. But ultimately, after years of globalization and trade, um, people have figured it out and starting to push back. Okay, and this is kind of, I think, surprised the political party throughout the Western world, because they were sort of trying to argue for free trade or so-called globalization, but it was hurting a lot of people from financially. Americans are saving a lot of money, but it's the rich that are saving, and they're accumulating investment assets. But the average household is not really making much more money than they did in the 70s in real terms when you adjust for inflation. So so this can't go on forever, and people woke up to it, and you had kind of a so now the problem is, what's the solution? The solution, diagnosing the problem is much easier than actually applying a solution, because protectionism is not in itself a solution, because if you apply protectionism as your strategy to deal with it, um, eventually you become uncompetitive with your own products.
Yes.
Okay, so that doesn't work. Um, so so trading partners is one way that could possibly solve that. So we've sort of doubled down on the North American free trade thing, and possibly they were looking at some others with Eastern some Asian countries, but but it's a challenge because uh, there's no inflation. I mean, if you look around, only areas that you're actually experiencing inflation in the United States are things that the government subsidized or the government controls the supply of, like education, housing. Those are two areas that, you know, healthcare, all three are going up, experiencing inflation. Everything else is not.
Hmm.
You don't see inflation. You see quite the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what the solutions are, but what has to happen, whatever the solution is, I don't know, but the end result has to be that more people have higher wages so that less is being saved by the few and more is being consumed.
Yep.
Because the people that make 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, 200,000 a year, they consume most of their money. They spend it. People that make 10 times that don't consume much more, relatively speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So we need more consumption, okay? But then wait a minute, we're supposed to be trying to save the planet. How are we going to have more consumption if we're going to save the planet?
Yep.
So you got these conundrums going on.
Well, isn't that when you go find an emerging market in some third world country and start selling to them?
Well, I mean, they don't consume that much, and especially not the more expensive products. So what has happened is China has found the United States. They want to
Right.
sell to them,
Yeah.
and the Fords of the world have to compete. So they outsource some product and make some product here, and you have. But I think in long term, what you're saying, I think would hopefully be the goal, and that Africa would be a great growing continent with middle class and they would consume. But again, we just went through that with China and they're not consuming anywhere near what they're selling.
I see.
So it's not a matter of degree, as long as you are selling me more stuff and not consuming my stuff, we have a problem,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And eventually somebody's gonna say, wait a minute, this is not a fair game. We're gonna end it. And that's, I think, what the world is getting to. But there's a lot of relationships that rely on this trade. So you have Germany is really, it does a lot of exporting to China. So they don't want to stand up to China. So they weren't going to back the United States in some kind of then you have other countries that couldn't care less. So they want to stand up to China because they feel like they're being bullied. And you have other countries that stand to benefit if the United States doesn't trade with China, they will trade with them. So you have all these geopolitics going around it. But at the end of the day, uh, education has gotten prohibitively expensive to Americans. Housing is an issue for many people. Um, I don't know if I could afford to live where I live. If I had to buy my house today in Nashville, I'd have to live outside the county, I think, or live in a much smaller place.
Mm-hmm.
And I bought my house just less than 20 years ago. Less than 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So can you imagine what it's like for the average Nashvilleian to find housing?
Yeah.
And even in this environment,
Yep.
we're in the middle of a pandemic. Uh, so it's challenging. So yeah, education, housing, healthcare has become a big issue because, quite frankly, healthcare is a simple issue in America. It costs $6,000 roughly per person per year to have good healthcare insurance. And if you have that kind of policy, it doesn't go up a lot in price every year. The insurance company negotiates rates and so on and so forth. So the problem is to be able to afford a $6,000 policy, you need to be making. I mean, even if you're making 24,000, that's a very high percentage.
Yeah,
You
it
can't
doesn't work.
afford that.
Yep.
Can you imagine how much you have to make then if you have 3 kids?
Yep.
Dear God,
Yep.
I mean that's just So it's very challenging, and so the politicians are making promises and these grandiose things like as if it's going to appear magically. But what we're really talking about is, do we pay for it through deficit spending? Go in the hole to pay for it's generally not a good idea to pay for things that don't have that you're going to consume with dollars 10 years from now.
Yes.
It's not a bad idea to buy a house that you're going to live in that's going to appreciate in value. That's a good asset to do that. But when you pay a doctor for a procedure and the procedure is done, it's worthless. There's no value for it anymore.
Yep.
So are we going to really do deficit spending to pay for that? Doesn't seem like a wise decision. But then, everybody wants to make promises and so on, but maybe the real problem is the jobs that would come with a decent insurance that you only have to pay 20-30% of, and the employer would pay 75 or so percent, whatever, and it's affordable because you're making good money.
Yes. Yeah. Back to Nation A. If I'm selling to you and I'm selling you more, now I have a trade surplus, correct? I'm selling you more. I have a trade surplus that's great for me. My currency is going to go up.
All things being equal, yes.
All things being equal. You have a trade deficit. This is bad for you. You're buying from me more than you're selling to me. So now you have a trade deficit. Your currency is going to go down, all things being equal. Wouldn't I have another country that I am also trading with, but I have a trade deficit with them, and that sort of balances out my surplus with you? And likewise, wouldn't you have another country, or at least attempt to have another country that you have a trade surplus with that balances out your deficit with me?
Yes, that's very true. But in our example, it was just the two of us.
Yeah, okay.
And but we can have 10 people around this table, okay? But that does not mean that after we all get done, that there aren't winners and losers.
Right.
So the same example applies, you know? And not all trade is equal too, because some trade is higher margin, supports higher paying jobs. Some trade is low margin. So there is I promised when we started this that we don't want to trash global trade and so on. And you and I and Apple, okay, benefit a lot from the labor that China is and the factories China finances to make our cell phones, okay? Because we're able to use something that costs would be prohibitive to own otherwise. That's one, okay? Two, it opens up the opportunity for all kinds of other enterprise that wouldn't even have a chance to reach you and I if that phone didn't exist, okay? And three, Apple wouldn't make anywhere near the profits, wouldn't even make the phone because there wouldn't be enough demand. So you have a lot of jobs in America that are supported by Apple, by all and by the way, I don't have an Apple phone. It doesn't matter what phone it is. The whole ecosystem is being supported by this, right? All the app development, all the, it's massive industry. The Facebooks of the world, the developers of software. This is all made possible through specialization. And it was accelerated by the fact that Chinese were willing to dump billions of dollars that they got from selling, gadgets to the West to create jobs for their people. They pay them very little money, but they can make things like this, and Silicon Valley engineers make a lot more money, and then we turn around and start sell stuff. And hey, how do people consume your product, Kent?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So would you be consumed if it was not the case? No, you wouldn't even be consumed.
Yeah.
Right? You'd be on a radio program somewhere, right?
Yeah.
You'd be like talking to like 500 people in Greenville, South Carolina.
Yeah. Hey, we can have billboards finally. Yeah, that's true. There's that trickle effect.
So
big time.
there is a huge benefit to all of this and productivity but it does leave people behind, and there are consequences, and the consequences are being felt. And the bottom line is you have a lot of the benefit of all of this is being accumulated and saved in financial assets. Okay, so stocks go up, and it's people that own stocks are not the enemy. Those are the investors that are much needed to create the job tomorrow. So the point though is that you're not paying the wages. Now, why don't you pay the wages? Well, because you don't need to. You don't have sufficient demand to pay the wages. This isn't like somebody's against the little guy or somebody is rigging this thing, It's the reality. The reality is we have insufficient demand, and everybody's trying to live off what little demand there is, and we have plenty of capital to invest. So, by the way, I'm not like, I'm not a social engineer. I'm not out with like agenda here. Personally, I'm interested in it, but my real interest in this is the investment implications, because that's what I do. How does this affect the investments am I making? Is this going to be a disaster down the road, or is this investment going to benefit from this? For example, you take a mature company like Kraft, okay, which I don't know if you're aware, but Kraft was part of a merger that Warren Buffett was involved in, Kraft Heinz, and
Yes.
so on. What is that all about? So essentially, you have mature businesses, right? They're being attacked from everywhere with cheaper product. I mean, how innovative can you be with with dish soap? For God's sake. I mean, at the end of the day, it's dish soap. You can make it nice for your hands and all of this stuff. It's still dish soap. And they got their market share. They're doing all this. So what you have mature business, and so what they do is they buy these things so they can cut costs, rationalize away some of the brands, so they have something that's more profitable, that needs less capital, so it's more capital efficient, more profits, even if it means shutting off some sales, but hopefully because of the bigger size, you actually, can shed more costs and therefore make more money. You know, that's fine. You know, um, but that's a typical example of a mature business that does not have this wind at its back, or excuse me, the wind in its sails. Okay, as opposed to what we like to invest in, which is disruptive technologies that are going to come in and invent a way to do banking that's going to keep you from walking into Wells Fargo. So that's a new technology, new idea that solves a problem for you, that maybe gets you money faster to your phone. You don't have to utilize, use the bank and so on and so forth. And that's just like a small example, but you have industries that will flourish, and you have industries that are mature. Now you can still make money with mature businesses. You just have to run them with that idea. And then, of course, we want to lend money too. We like bonds too. And so we want to know, what kind of companies do we lend to? Do we really understand what's going to happen to Kraft Heinz? Is this really a good bond, as opposed to somebody else? So I look at it from an investment implications, but I enjoy it. So obviously I have opinions. I don't know if they're worth anything, but at the end of the day, I'm just looking for the investment thesis and how it affects our investment.
Yeah. So to put that really simply, if you had what looked like a really great management team working a really good idea, but this is a new idea and it's a bit of disruptive, you're I mean, there's lots of factors here, but you're gonna be maybe a little bit more optimistic on that than you would be on an established company that's looking for an investment because they're going to cut costs to be more profitable. You're seeing this as a better long-term play, better return on your investment long-term than just a quick turnaround here, but maybe long-term that's not. You can only cut costs so much.
Yeah, I like to say that the reason we consume information is to paint a realistic picture of the future, right? We may not know the future, but we constantly read the paper. So I want to paint a realistic picture of the business outlook and the future environment for this company and that company, and make the choices based on that.
All right, so NAFTA. So UMCA, is that what it is?
Yeah, I think so.
U.S. Mexico Canada Agreement, USMCA came on board. I didn't realize it, but like it fully came on board July 1 of 2020. So it was structured before. I think it was signed into law in 2019 or something like that.
I didn't know that.
But really came on board July 1, 2020. This is what I just read, and which was surprising to me because I didn't ever know that. There was so much going on. I think that got no attention. But apparently, NAFTA was not good at some things that USMCA, the new agreement, was better at. Do you know much about this? Can you talk us through that? Well, the other thing that
I can tell you some of the things. Yeah.
The other thing that I saw in that article was that, and I didn't know this. This was a surprise to me. We trade 4 times as much with our North American neighbors as we do with China. I just thought we were trading so much more with China than pretty much everybody else, but apparently that's not the case.
Yeah, so there are some obvious things you can point out that with the North American Free Trade Agreement happened what in the 80s, I think, or 90s, early 90s.
I feel like it
Uh,
was the 80s, but
yeah. So it specifies, for example, what percentage of the parts have to come from within a zone to be exempt from certain taxes and so on, right? Tariff. And the obvious thing that was obsolete about it is that the components in cars actually change over time. You know, there are components in a Tesla that didn't even exist
yeah.
and go into a car prior to back in 1990. There are components in my car that didn't exist. And we didn't have airbags. I don't remember airbags till like 20 years ago. I don't remember that. And you have all the sensors that go on LCD screens. You didn't have that either. So those things just didn't count as parts. So you had that issue and so on. So ultimately, what NAFTA is about, if you want it from a big picture standpoint, it's really managed trade. And actually, interestingly enough, Jimmy Carter, um, under his administration, came up with this idea where, because in the 70s, the automobile industry in the United States was decimated, okay, because cost of fuel and the inefficient, unreliable cars was a disaster, and the Japanese were doing really well. So the under the Carter administration, they came up with this idea that to pass a law where, based on the local content of the car, you could actually bypass tariffs. So, so in other words, to the Japanese manufacturer, if you assemble a car here, make some of the components, it was 60%, I believe, was the magic number. Don't quote me on that. So, and actually, the famous story that I was told when I first came to Tennessee is it was Lamar Alexander took this legislation and went to Japan and met with auto executives in Japan, and basically, they told him, look, if you put a plant in Tennessee, you don't have to pay for this, you don't have to pay. Well, we know that, but why would we put it in Tennessee? And famously, he drew a circle around Tennessee that was 500-mile circumference, and that included so much of the population of the United States, and boom, you had the car industry evolve just south of here, right? And then that brought more manufacturing, and next thing you know, like, I mean, Toyota Tundra is made in the U.S.
Yep.
They won't let you forget that in the commercial, right? So
No, they don't.
no. And that by the way is interesting. Now you see so much, Ford talking about that. So I remember that back in the 80s, that used to be a thing. Walmart used to advertise that, made in America, and all of a sudden they stopped that shit because they weren't made in America anymore. You couldn't afford to buy stuff from America. So now you're seeing that again, and that doesn't that those kinds of those kinds of movements don't just disappear overnight, and the politicians will cater to that. And it'd be interesting to see what happens and how corporate America they're going to try to do the same thing they did to the energy industry, right? They're going
right.
to try to play both sides.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So, by the way, I don't really know much about where kind of a free trade or kind of a laissez-faire kind of economy, like kind of that viewpoint
Yeah.
versus more protectionism. Like, do parties, Republican, Democrat, fall cleanly on each line, or is that just a mix when you get to this point here?
No, they may say we're for free trade. Somebody may say that, but there's no such thing as free trade. We live in a managed trade economy. Uh, I mean, stories are endless about me. Try to import a pillow into France. I mean, there's regulations upon regulation, but livestock into France is very prohibitive because you have to go through so much certification to prove that you didn't use chemicals and this and that and the other. But in a sense, the small farmer could never meet that standard because he would have to have so much investment. So that's protectionism. They're protecting their farmer. Same way with the Japanese protect the rice farm. So we've been protecting truck manufacturing in the United States for many years. That's the reason why you don't see a lot of trucks made overseas, because there's actually a tariff, a big tariff on trucks. Even the small cars that like come from South Korea, the Hyundais and all that, they pay a substantial sum in tariffs. It's just kind of understood, So there is no free trade. We live in managed economies. It's just that not everything is so important that it has to be regulated. But there's a lot of jobs around cars, and let's face it. If you want the truth to be told, in the past and up to now, we've had our ass handed to us in manufacturing. It's because of cars, nothing else. I mean, it's all that matters is cars. It's the cars are the big driver here.
This is why the politicians are always talking about car manufacturing all the time.
Yeah,
Okay.
but see, that's yesterday's problem, and I'm not saying you can't look at yesterday's problem, but tomorrow's problem is really the one they need to wake up to, which is that our education system preparing people for tomorrow's job? Do they have the technical skills? We're spending. Our kids are getting behind, further and further behind. And what we need to be doing, we need to be starting them in school at a younger age, so that the disadvantaged kids have more of an opportunity to learn at an early age, so they don't get to first grade and they don't know anything and nobody socialized with them. The government has certain things that they can do that families and individuals can't on their own. Okay. Now, look, not all families are the same, Kent. I'm sure you spend a lot of time. I've seen you with your kids. They participate in your life. I've seen them watch you work out. You tell them what you're going to do. Not everybody's like that. And if we're going to bring our society up, we got to bring everybody. And so we need to start thinking about things like that. But it seems to me that the politicians just want to make promises, and they don't want to solve problems or be held accountable to solving certain problems. They've gotten masters at freebies. What can you get? Well, I'm going to make this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And then you look 4 years later, how much of it has happened?
Yeah.
And is my life really improved because of you? Or is it more improved if you just got out of the way?
Yes, exactly. And when you say car manufacturing is really what we're talking about when we had our ass handed to us in manufacturing, is that just because the people it takes, the labor it takes to manufacture the cars based on the demand being so high, it's such a huge chunk of manufacturing in America?
It's good jobs.
Is that why?
Yeah, it's good jobs, and we consume so many cars.
Okay.
And let's face it, besides your house, okay, what are the big ticket items in your life?
Yeah.
Your car, right?
Yep.
Now, your house can't be made in China. I mean, they're trying, but it's kind of hard to execute. Okay? Can't make your house in Germany, but the car is very mobile by definition. So it becomes a very competitive product, has a lot of technology, big sticker price. Some of us drive expensive ones, some of us drive clean energy ones, some of us drive whatever, some of us drive multiple ones, So it's a huge industry, and not to forget not just the personal consumption, but the commercial use of vehicles is huge as well, and so that's definitely a 20th century innovation that's carried into the 21st century, and it's going to continue to matter. But then there's a lot of other things that matter. The apps matter. All these things that people have to develop and so on, the future jobs. And I'm afraid that we're leaving more people behind there because a lot of our, families that are not middle class or what have you don't have the exposure. Their kids don't have the exposure to technology as do people that have the internet at home and kids that get savvy at it. But even still, I mean, surfing the internet is not being technologically savvy. You got to learn the tool, how to use it as a tool, and so on and so forth. So it takes scientists, it takes developers, it takes technicians, all kinds of things. And so, I think that look, government is rarely the solution, but sometimes they can plan on the future by seeing the whatever. But we, we're kind of avoid solving problems, playing politics.
Yeah, most certainly. So when you look at what's going well in America right now as it relates to global trade, if we could, as much as possible, set China aside for a second. Outside of China, what's going well with our global trade right now, and what's not going so well? Has anything come to mind with countries that we sort of have we kind of have the better end of the deal, and then other
Yeah.
countries that come to mind where we really don't have
Well,
the
I mean,
better
you
end of the
mentioned
deal?
earlier we trade quite a bit with Mexico and Canada. And our Canada trade has a lot to do with us importing energy, and it's possible that actually we're getting a better end of the deal with that relationship because energy is not a high additive product. In other words, it's just a commodity, where some of the stuff they import from us are actually consultants and technology and software and things like that. So I think we win there. So certainly we're winners in software. We one of our products unfortunately doesn't go down as an export, but is our university system. Our education is one of our biggest exports. It doesn't go down in the statistics of export because it occurs on our soil.
Right.
It doesn't like
Yep.
when you leave the country, they don't say 4-year degree leaving,
Yeah.
6-year degree leaving.
Yeah.
They don't do that. So, but there's a lot of that. We continue to innovate, and look, nobody has been able to replicate the venture capital industry in California. As everybody's trying, okay, non-existent in most of the world. Europe doesn't really have venture capital. The only private investments in Europe are buyouts. I mean, there's some venture capital, but very, very little. Most of the venture capital, as far as I can tell, in China is just a copying of our venture capital. So we do Amazon, somebody does Alibaba. I mean, it's just because we're not allowing Amazon there, so they do. So it's not really. However, you can't take it for granted because that's how the Japanese started. Japanese started making useless things and gadgets and toys. Now they make some of the best cars in the world and some of the best watches, I think, in the world. Some of the best lot of things. And the problem they have is they don't have a growing population and they're an island, so they have to import all raw materials. And they're a closed society, so there's a limit to it. So and you know what? We also import some of the best minds throughout the world. We're talking about exports. Man, people with energy, drive, and an idea, they want to come to America. That is huge. That is huge. I hope we never.
Mm-hmm.
I hope we. um, so we consume more than we produce, but that's okay. It's because of our standard of living. Okay, that's we don't have to run a because of our standard of living. We don't need to be sort of on par with the rest of the world from a trade standpoint. Okay, but we need a vibrant middle class. We need jobs, not our 15 an hour. I mean, 15 an hour doesn't even begin to solve your problems with my health insurance. Okay, I mean that may be a conversation about you know entry level jobs and how much they should pay, but it's not a viable wage. We need jobs that are 55, 65, 75,000 an hour that can lead to somebody actually buying a house and building, paying for a child's education and so on. So that's I think that's really what it takes to maintain the purchasing power. And we've been going backwards, because just because of the lack of wage growth, and that's a global phenomenon because of the lack of demand. Um, and it's
That's
be,
not a USA specific problem. That's a global problem.
yeah, it's a global problem.
But when you say that
wages in Germany have gone backwards for years, but the Germans don't seem to mind as much as the Americans. They don't raise hell about it as much.
when
But
you
it's coming.
okay, it's coming in Germany.
I think.
When you say that we are exporting less than we're importing, and you're saying it's not the biggest problem we have right now because of our vibrant middle class, But long term, that's a problem because this goes back to your example earlier where that's going to be an issue for us, correct?
Well, you can afford certain amount of deficit and borrowing, especially with world reserve currency. Okay, you don't have to be an expensive currency to actually be a good currency.
Okay.
So no, it's not a problem. The magnitude though is, when you're running, sorry about that. When you're running deficits that are, you know, trillions of dollars annually, how sustainable is that? What is
Right.
that going to do into the future? As you can see now, every time somebody has an idea, how do we pay for it? Because we're already, and it kind of raises some interesting questions. Like for example, Biden currently wants to raise taxes. Okay, but we're not raising taxes to balance the budget. Okay, it's not even close, right? We're going to raise taxes. It's not going to balance the budget, but we're going to spend some more money. So it begs the question: why even bother with the taxes? Just spend the money,
Yeah.
right? I mean, if we're spending money anyway, so are you saying that we're at a point? Are they saying we're at a point where we can't do anymore? They're not saying that.
Yeah.
So why are we taxing people? Just because it's politically, the right thing to say. I mean, we're certainly not going to do it for any good purpose that I know of, because whatever spending they have in mind, you can do it anyway.
That's the part I don't completely understand. All right, I get that government doesn't make any money. They either get that money from taxing or printing the money or borrowing it. That's the only way government has money. And so taxing comes back to hurt the small business owners. Borrowing from the future hurts everybody. Printing it. What is the problem if we just said no tax, we're just going to print money? What would be what's the downside to that?
Oh, eventually this water would cost $1 million.
Because inflation?
Yeah, nobody would want you. I mean, you just look at Lebanon. I was in Lebanon last year. It took 1,500 liras to buy $1. Today it's 8,000. Just 1 year later. 1 year, 1 month later.
So that's
because they printed too much money.
Okay, so then back to taxes. That's why you can't get rid of taxes and just print money then, right?
Right, but yeah, that's right. But they're taxing not to pay off the debt. They're just going to spend more. So in other words,
Yes,
we're going to be further deficit next year than we are this year. So what if you're not going to reverse that trend? What good is it to tax?
Yes. Okay. I see your point. With everything going on, the deficit is not something that's being talked about much.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. It was back when the Tea Party was big on that, right?
Right.
And that just sort of went away.
Well, because you had some very pissed off oligarchs called the Koch brothers that were upset that Obama wouldn't compromise with them on the Obamacare or some other issues. I don't, so they funded this movement, and that's essentially the society.
They funded the Tea Party movement.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
The essentially that's the society we live in today, where every movement is really some acts that some billionaire has to pick.
Yeah.
With another billionaire, we're supposed to go out in the street and root and hollow and cheer for them, but it's just one billionaire fighting another billionaire.
Yeah.
What's in it for us?
This is a complicated country we live in. And I'm glad to be here, by the way.
Yeah, me too. Sure.
Our biggest exports, you know what they are? I mean, obviously, entertainment's got a big one for us, right? Technology.
I would have done some homework if you're gonna ask me.
No, I'm just kind of curious.
So
agriculture, big export of America.
So I mean, in dollar terms, maybe, but you got to look at exports in terms of really the added value or the what. So, example, there's a lot more profit and salaries that go behind software than goes behind something like corn.
Yes.
So you have to look at it that way. But we can look it up if you guys want to. But at the end of the day, we don't have to be an exporting country, net exporter. That's not really necessary. What we do need is to have sufficient demand and product demand, either domestically or globally, and sufficient jobs that pay sufficient wages.
Yeah.
That's really what we need. But if I own the copyright to a carburetor, or well, I don't know if they use carburetors on cars anymore, but let's say I own a copyright on a fuel injected system, and I have it made in China and sell it here, I am making most of the money. Okay, and I will have people, designers here, whatever. I may not have the manufacturer here. I may not have line workers, but I'm still getting the profit. So it's a net benefit to America, and I'm going to invest that money, hopefully, and then make a product for the Tesla. So I have my next product, whatever. So you don't have to make everything or so on, but we got to have balance in, again, demand and the jobs, good paying jobs. And the problem is, the challenge is that this is a global problem. Countries that like China can sort of take away jobs only so long, but before somebody says, wait a minute, I'm not trading with you anymore. I mean, it's just human nature, right? And there's an interesting book called, I hope I don't butcher this, Trade Wars Are Class Wars. Okay. Can I cheat?
Yeah. Definitely you can cheat. By the way, do you want any Buffalo Trace? Are you good?
I would love some.
All right. Kick me your glass over there, and I'll pour you a little bit here.
I just want to check Kindle.
You made a pretty compelling pitch for Kindle the other week, too.
This is just the app. Okay, Trade Wars Are Class Wars. So I was right. Wow,
Trade Wars Are Class Wars?
Yeah, Trade Wars Are Class Wars. Matthew Klein and Michael Pettis. One of them, and forgive me, I should not be saying this one-on-one. One of them is a professor, I think, in China, and I should know which one, but I'm going to embarrass myself and say I don't. But
Andrew,
anyway, so the point of this is that the problem, the challenge of globalization is not for the business owners and the people that have the wealth, because they're making it off their stocks. Or the challenge is so therefore, just like the title says, trade wars are class wars. So it is a war between the Chinese worker and the American worker.
I see.
There's not enough for me. I have to share it with you. You're not buying enough from me. So now we have a trade war. Okay.
I see.
The elites and the companies don't care.
Makes sense.
Right? They're going to make money either way. They're going to move production, lift production. They'll adjust to the laws. They'll do whatever, right? So, matter of fact, intellectual property and things like that started to hurt American companies, but they were very reluctant to go to confront the Chinese with it. They were whispering to the administration, both Obama and Trump, say, hey, you got to do something with it. So because they risk not being able to profit from their own product.
They didn't want to piss off the Chinese themselves, the company, so they went to the government to try to...
Right.
Okay.
And so I want to answer a question you just asked, because my brain is slow sometimes. Microchips are our best export, our most important export, by far. We have technology. The technology to make microchips is U.S. technology. Even the German machines that are used to make microchips use U.S. technology. You cannot. The Chinese are way behind on how small the wafers can be, and that whole technology. And that is going to be critical technology going forward, and that's why the fight between the Trump administration and 5G and all of that. So that is our biggest.
Microchips.
Microchips by far are the most important. I don't know if in dollar terms are biggest, but they are the most important.
Do you know offhand if Corning makes microchips?
Corning does.
Corning does?
Yes. I think Texas Instruments, Corning, they all make, obviously, Intel.
Okay. Because when you said microchips and even the machines needed to make the microchips in Germany, I had a friend from back in New York who worked at Corning, and he traveled to Germany some. And to fine-tune these machines and everything to make whatever they were making, and maybe it was microchips. A lot of this
intellectual property owned by, companies like Corning. I think Qualcomm is a big one.
Okay.
I think this book discusses some of.
Did you find, Andrew? Did you find some of the other exports out of America? Some of the main ones.
Yes. Number one is machinery, including computers. Exactly what Fadi was saying.
That would include the microchips, probably, right?
Includes, yep, $205.9 billion, 12.5% of total exports. Right underneath that is mineral fuels, including oil, at 1.99 bill, and then electrical machinery at number 3 at 173.2 billion, 10.5%. There's also aircraft, spacecraft, vehicles, optical, medical apparatus, plastic articles, precious metals, pharmaceuticals, and organic chemicals.
Yeah, so just leave that up there for a second. So machinery, including computers, is 12.5% of our total exports. Mineral fuels, including oil, that's a big one. That is interesting, but see, that only happened in the last couple of years too, right? That we became a net exporter.
Right, and these are not net numbers. I think this is just what we export. So you could possibly subtract some numbers from there, but it's very, very important that these are the exports. These are important exports. But
right,
you're right, we are a net exporter.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Yeah. Well, you're right.
I think that would include. So that number would include like refined fuels that have to be added to gasoline to process it to make gasoline, things like that.
Yep.
But for the raw product, I think we're exporting around 6 million barrels a day of crude oil.
Wow.
I believe that's the number.
Wow.
What else is on that?
The fastest grower is the pharmaceutical industry.
Interesting.
Up by 10.8% since 2018. So definitely really fast. Second place for improving export sales was mineral fuels, including oil, thanks to a 3.7% gain led by crude petroleum.
Look at this. America's shipment of vehicles posted the third fastest gain in value via, well, that's only 1.8% increase, but there you have an increase in vehicles being manufactured, presumably, in America and sending them out.
Mm-hmm. Leading decliner was gems and precious metals, which fell 6.6%, weighed down by thinner revenues mainly for diamonds and gold.
What year was this?
This is 2019 numbers.
What's interesting, too, about the going back to the, I think it's UMCA for just a second, is I read something interesting on that was, the International Trade Commission, ITC, which is an independent, nonpartisan commission, estimated that the USMCA will have a greater impact on the U.S. economy, jobs, and wages than any other trade agreement it has ever reviewed. Projected to raise GDP by 0.3% and had 176,000 jobs. I mean, we were just talking the other day with, who was it, Andrew? We were talking about what seemed like a mismanagement of Trump's campaign, just focusing on some of the wrong. Oh, it was Stephen Mansfield.
Stephen, yeah.
We were just discussing Trump and how he definitely has his share of haters and everything. But when you look over some of the things he did, UMCA being one of them, like, why wasn't that talked about? The fact that was the best trade agreement ITC has ever seen. It just wasn't. It wasn't at the level of consciousness in America.
Well, I think that sometimes his communication style doesn't lend to one. And he did a bad job in that one debate where it was more argumentative and attack. And I think that if he had taken that tack, the more argumentative he was, the more it fed into this out of control kind of crazy guy, whatever. It's his style. He didn't change.
Yeah.
For the whole 4 years, he didn't change. But you know what? I do think that there were a lot of positives that came out of that administration. I'm not sure that it was especially in the first 2 years, that it was a very stable administration, and it looked very scary at times with people going in and out. But quite frankly, a lot of it was due to the fault of the Republicans. The Republican establishment was kind of either shunned him from actually participating in the administration. That was the first thing. But then when they did, or at least the people that he ended up having to rely on, they were sort of anti the administration while they're in the administration. I mean, at some point we had to remind people that actually, yeah, when you work for the president, he does say the final word. I mean, really, we have to remind you of that? When did that become like a debatable issue, you know? But it's kind of funny, some of the stuff that came out of this. But I think that being an outsider into a system was challenging.
Yeah.
Neither party liked it, you know, and you have to think about the Republican Party has changed forever. They can't go back because there's no base to go back to. Once people latched onto this, you know, all they have to do now is figure out a way how to get rid of the racist label that people keep throwing on them.
Yeah.
And you know, on the other side, you have a problem too. Both parties have a problem. The other side is that you really can't be the party that's known for socialism in this country.
Yeah.
It's not a winning argument. We don't have a single place in the world we can point to where socialism actually benefited people.
But people don't know that. I don't know that. I don't know that it isn't a winning argument in this country.
Look,
and if it almost is now, how about 4 years from now? How about 8 years from now? If we keep heading this direction, at some point it is going to be a winning argument, even though there's all kinds of objective data around us, including what different states are doing and how that's working out for them. But then you can go beyond that and look at what other countries are doing. But people aren't paying attention to that.
So first of all, they don't understand socialism, and when they say socialism, they don't actually mean socialism. So here's what they mean. Socialism is where the central power controls the means of production and the allocating of resources. They say socialism as somehow to equalize and make a fair economic system. In other words, a better distribution of wages. Well, you can't do that through socialism. I mean, you can do it through welfare, which is socialism, but it's going to take a lot of welfare to bring up to $65,000 a year.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work that way.
Yep.
A good paying job comes with insurance, and you save your 401k and you have a pension. That's the life. That's what we should be selling in America. And I disagree with you. I think that there are a lot of people that you base your opinion on that socialism works for them because they grew up they're just kind of brainwashed by the idea that it's all unfair, this and that and the other. But I can tell you one thing. Almost all immigrants know socialism is the wrong way to go because they came from it.
I agree with that 100%.
They came from countries that are everybody's trying to mention. Why do you think in Spanish community, Mexican community bordering Mexico ends up going for Trump? He's the racist that's building a wall. Why are you voting for him?
Yep.
You know, why does he get the Cuban vote? You know, it's because they came here to escape that.
Yep.
You know, and it doesn't take much. You know, yeah, a lot of young people can do a lot of stupid things in school. I learned some stupid things. I came out of school as a bleeding heart liberal, you know, and I just kept trying to make it work and it just wouldn't work, wouldn't add up. You know, the incentive is what makes things work. You have to have capitalist incentive to create innovation that creates jobs. You know, socialism did not bring you the Apple phone. Capitalism did.
Yes. Yep.
You know, and what are we seeing in Iran? Iran doesn't have enough money to invest to even produce the oil that they have in the ground. Venezuela, same thing. These countries, Venezuela flipped into socialism at a point when it was a rich country that had a lot of oil because it was going to use that oil to benefit the little guy. Okay? And all of a sudden they flip it, and 50 years later, where are they? You don't think America would be in the same place if it flipped to socialism today? Absolutely. We wouldn't have anything 50 years from now.
I totally agree with it.
Yeah.
Look, I totally agree with what you're saying, but I think there's a lot of Americans that aren't thinking in those terms. They're thinking, how can I make this a little bit better for me without having to actually go work a little bit harder?
Maybe so. I'm sure there are people that believe in a lot of things, but the way they voted on November 3rd, socialism did not win.
Yeah.
That's what's important.
Yeah. No, I agree with you on that. Brian Buffini is an immigrant from Ireland.
You know, one way to make my blood boil is to talk about socialism and bringing in systems that immigrants escaped.
Yeah.
Okay, that is because I'm an immigrant. I'm a first-generation immigrant. I was fortunate to come to this country, and it makes me fearful, sad to think that all of a sudden we're going to have a state where it's political whether the cops show up or not. What laws are going to be enforced is going to be political, or what's popular by the current mayor. Okay, this whole move to bring control over the police department. I want the Constitution to control the police department, not the local mayor. You know, that's where we're failing. Okay, I don't want. There shouldn't even be a debate. If I'm in trouble, I can get whatever law firm I want to get. That is a fundamental right in America. I cannot believe that people are getting away with vilifying people for simply getting representation in court. Isn't that what a murderer gets? That.
Yeah.
You can murder somebody and get protection, and the government would pay for it. But if you go out and get your own protection and pay for it yourself, you're going to be attacked. And now we're going to talk socialism in this country. It's kind of like finding your best asset and cutting it off.
Yes. Well, it's not kind of like it. It is like it. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It's exactly what it is.
Where's Palo Alto? How many jobs? How many jobs has Microsoft created? People look at the wealth of these billionaires like it's coming out of their pocket. It didn't come out of your pocket. Money multiplies. That is capital that now he is investing in all kinds of things, including better life for a lot of African people, including energy research in the United States, venture capital, everything else. Capital is not the enemy. You know, you don't solve the wage problem by taxing capital. You solve the wage problem by creating the jobs that pay higher wages. And yes, you might have to do it through some protectionism or better trade deals. I agree with that. We don't live in a that's not a criticism of capitalism. Saying we need regulations is not a criticism of capitalism, because we're not in a free trade, free-for-all capitalism. We're not in that, okay? So if we were, and you were saying, oh, it's not working, then I would say, okay, then that's a failure. If it's right, but we're not there. We're in managed trade. We're working with other countries that are basically, at best, managing their trade with us. At worst, they're actually prying on our jobs. They are actively engineering ways to steal our jobs, okay? And some of our leaders in the past have participated and aided in that happening because they didn't care. It doesn't matter. It's business. We're doing business.
Yep.
Well, you're doing business on the backs of Americans that now can't afford their health insurance.
Yeah. Well, it's not just business. Sometimes they're paid large sums of money, right?
Absolutely.
Through lobbyists, and they go through multiple layers of protection to make sure that it's not clear that another country is funding the lobbyists. But sometimes international money does work its way in here and works its way through the lobbyists, and now you have politicians making decisions.
You bring up another point is, you know, capitalism, things get allocated relatively efficiently in capitalism. I really believe that. Government is not, even democratic government, is the anti-capitalism, because it's allocating resources based on influence, based on those things that you just mentioned.
Right.
So moving to a socialist system means getting rid of any efficient allocation of capital and moving to a system where oligarch and people like Putin would actually allocate the resources of a society and how things are being spent. I mean, that's asinine.
Yeah.
You know, to even be considering that when we have what we have.
Yes. Well, didn't that exactly happen with the Alibaba founder in China? They kind of raised him up and then send him to Germany?
Yeah, and they
took over his company?
Well, they put an Ant IPO. It was supposed to be the biggest IPO ever in the world, and they scrapped it because he made a speech that said our financial institutions are backwards and they need to be more innovative and challenged, and they put him down, buddy. They X'd that. That Ant IPO did not happen.
This was Chinese IPO?
Yeah. Chinese IPO. Yeah.
Brian Buffini wrote a book called The Immigrant Edge a couple years ago, and it's just this concept of immigrants coming into America are generally more successful than the average American by quite a lot because of some of these things I think you're talking
it's
about.
Self-selection. Who's Michael? Who said this?
Brian Buffini.
Okay, the author of 5,000 Hours was the name of that book.
10,000 Hours. Malcolm Gladwell.
Malcolm, he said that too.
Oh, really?
But that's not saying much. It's self-selection. I mean, of course, we've benefited from the best brains in the world. Okay, first of all, the people that worked on the nuclear bomb came from Germany. I mean, they were Jewish immigrants. Okay, who do you want? Some of the biggest tech companies are founded from people that came out of Russia and Germany or some other mathematician, well educated. They're all over the place. Uh, that's they are the American story.
Yeah.
This is no different than the ancestors that came when the came first time around. I mean,
Yep.
they were looking for a better life because they had ideas, but America was the great equalizer. Initially, it was about land. They could have their own land. They were basically having to work the land for the landowners in Europe. It's like monopoly. At the end of the game, it all ends up in the hands of one person. That was Europe. They came to America and they could get land grants and become productive and do their own thing. And next thing you know, they financed their own banking system. Next thing you know, we have a financial system that is far greater than anything Europe ever had. And then next thing you know, we have innovation, technology. We consume things, we innovate things. We have clocks that glow at night. We have things that do crazy things. We just keep going. And next thing you know, we want to land on the moon. We want to do this. We want to do that. What's Germany doing? Germany participates.
Making beer.
Right, making beer.
Yeah.
But no, they manufacture a lot of things. They're very good at it. They're superb engineers. But a lot of Germans are here in America making that stuff.
Yeah.
I believe fundamentally America is the fulfillment of the world dream. Okay? That's not flattery to America. That's flattery to human beings all over the world. They got to be able to live the human dream, the human race's dream, is innovate, take care of your family, have the ability to invent things, do things. And now we're selling it back to the rest of the world. Everybody wants to emulate us. But we have a couple of chumps in our society that say that we want to be like them. No, they want to be like you dummy.
Yeah. Fadi, why don't you tell us what you really think? How about that? Well, we're the back to the jobs though. How do you see? Well, let's hear the why does the Republican Party have this tag of racism? First of all, it's the Republican Party that abolished slavery, right? I mean, and so there's that for that camp's history.
Yeah.
And then under Trump, the African American community, Asian American community, and there was a third community that had the best run on jobs and income and everything. So does the Republican Party just need to get a little bit less whiteness in their ranks, and that does the trick, or what do they need to do there?
No, I think historically, Republicans have been more reserved about things like equal opportunity laws and doing things that will progressively encourage these types of things. So they got stuck with that label. But you never want to be the no party. So, but if you're anti-regulation, some regulation is good. Some regulation is not good. It's just for show. But if you still say no, you may come up looking like a racist.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that the important thing is how you handle it, and I don't think Trump handled it.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can call me a racist all day long. One, it's not gonna raise my blood level, right? I don't function like that. But at the same time, I know I'm not racist, and I can prove you I'm not racist, and I will follow the things that I do every day and do it by example. I don't have to, whatever. But it does seem to work as a political ploy to label people, not just racist, but labels. Because labels work. I mean, let's face it. Hitler did it. It's labeling people makes it very easy because then you don't listen to what they have to say. And let's face it, Trump sometimes was his own worst enemy.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So you can't feel sorry for the guy. He owns it. He asked to be president, and he owns it. Now, it's ironic that sometimes some people get away with and some people don't. Like, I mean, to me, when somebody tells a black, if somebody told me I'm not Lebanese because I don't vote a certain way, whatever.
It's
I'm
crazy.
Like, who the hell are you, white
Exactly.
boy? What are you telling me who I am now?
Yep.
And he, Biden got away with it.
Totally got
on
away with it.
tape.
Totally got away with it.
So it tells you that that's because one group that's triggered by those words is only triggered by them when they are against their enemy.
Yeah.
So it's not really a trigger. It's not really a real thing. It's just a way to demean somebody else.
Sure.
Right? I mean, otherwise people would be just offended either way.
Yep.
Right? And we've seen repeatedly where people get away with more on one side than they do on the other. Again, that goes back to the cancel culture or whatever.
Yep.
But people wise up to it. Look, I mean, if people are too dumb, then that's their problem, right? That's our problem as a society. I mean, we you get the leadership you deserve, because if it's really bad, then you do better next time.
Yep.
But if you keep electing the same people expecting different results, that's your problem.
Yeah. It's
right?
insanity.
So in a sense, I think that's why. Look, to me, I'm amazed as many people voted for Trump as they did, given what they were saying about him on MSNBC and CNN and ABC and CBS. I mean, it tells you that somebody was doing their own out-of-the-box thinking. They weren't listening to those stations.
Yes.
And I'll tell you, I don't think they're racist either. I don't think 70 million people in America are racist.
Yeah, I totally agree.
It's just not possible.
Yeah.
Okay.
I couldn't remember this the other day, Andrew, when I was trying to recall it to memory, but before the vice presidential debate, there was a commentator on ABC that was calling Mike Pence a bigot. That was the B word I couldn't remember. It was a bigot. And I was just like, who is this lady? And why is she calling Mike Pence a bigot? Because of all the things to like attack him. First of all, you're on ABC News. You're supposed to have an objective opinion. But second of all, to call Mike Pence a bigot, it just doesn't stick. It seems to me like they're getting their source data from the fact that he's Republican, from the fact that he's a male, and from the fact that he's a white.
Plus,
and come on, you got to do better than that.
He also disagreed with them on certain things, and they think that the only way you can disagree with that is if you're a booker. It can't be because of religious reasons. It can't be because of difference of opinion. So they label the enemy, and that's pretty typical in politics. I mean, Hitler labeled all his enemies. I mean, that's how you stop the debate.
Well, you do, but you're touching on a big issue now because labels is all over the place at this point, right? I mean, this is an issue we got to deal with at this point. Right. And now we have censorship on top of this labeling, and it's created a really dangerous scenario here. How do we get out of this situation?
Well, I don't think the people are listening. I think people are ahead of it. I think they're already rebelling. I think that's what I was trying to say by saying that I'm surprised he got as many votes as he did when they were saying all these things about him. So
thinking news has lost some credibility,
and when you say that on top of the fact that sometimes he's his own worst enemy. I mean, he owns some of that shit, right?
Yep.
So a better candidate would have gone a lot better in that situation. So what it tells me is that the name calling is not working.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I don't think it is, because if it did, you wouldn't have the outcome that you had.
Okay.
Okay. I think that people are just not following. It's like cry wolf. If somebody's a bigot over everything that they do, and everybody is a bigot, then obviously say, "Come on."
Exactly. So there's still some amount of common sense left in the greater American people, and we're picking up on some of this stuff. And
I think if Trump had just walked the final line and wasn't as offensive at some point, he took it down just a couple of notches, he would have ran away with the race.
I think if you did that, and then you had some different talking points in the campaign, I think he would have ran away with the.
Yeah, I mean, he did a lot of success. I mean, when's the last time three countries in the Middle East normalized relations with Israel? I mean,
it's a big deal.
I mean, that would have been a dream come true for Obama policy. I mean, he had to make a deal with the devil Iran, and that didn't even work. You know.
Yep.
So that there you had that. You had the North American Free Trade Agreement, and let's not forget that they were trying to impeach him from day one.
Exactly.
So that's not exactly conducive to making changes and so on and so forth. He had the Senate. Unfortunately, he didn't have the House after the first 2 years. So that kind of limits what you can do. You're kind of riding it out then. You're not really, there's a limit.
Yes,
Uh,
and I wasn't paying that much attention back then, but you can look at the attack on the president on Amazon. It's a documentary, and it kind of lays out what Trump was battling in the first couple years. I mean, he had all kinds of stuff being thrown at him, Russia collusion and everything. It was it was crazy how much
Yeah.
this was made up, and
Yeah.
but that takes time and attention.
Absolutely.
And there was at one point they're threatening his son. Was it Donald Trump Jr. maybe
Yeah.
for treason? I mean, like
Yeah, because he had a meeting supposedly or talked to while he was on the transition team with
Yes.
somebody.
Yeah, and I mean the punishment for treason is death, right?
Yeah.
So it's like there's a lot
But
going
it's
on there that he
also
was battling.
hypocritical. I think people see it all along. I mean, there. We also heard about Kerry talking to Iran long after the Obama administration. So how is that not treason? How is it got? It's just
Right.
so it's kind of like, again, that cry wolf.
Yeah.
And after a while, who cares?
Yeah, that's right.
Uh,
How do we get $50,000 to $75,000 a year jobs back? I mean, they're not just putting pieces to car
listen,
together. Robots do that
prefaced-
now.
I prefaced what I said earlier is that I'm into this because of obviously knowledge, and I do care, and on the investment implications, solutions are tough because it's just. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have any ever fight for our trade or whatever, but you can't solve it just with tariffs, things like that. So I think that the only good news I have for you as an answer is it doesn't take much. Okay, what I mean by that is just a couple of million cars a year would tip the point of car production states. So for example, you could have just like NAFTA says that you got to have certain amount of production, certain amount of the work and the labor has to come from the United States, like 60%, before you can avoid some of the taxes and tariffs. You can do the same thing with global trade. You can say, look, Mercedes, we want to continue to buy our product, but you sell this much to us and you export this much to the world. We need some of your production in the United States, and not just what you sell in the United States, but we need some of that exports that you do to move the United States. So net, it doesn't have to be equal. In other words, we still import cars from Germany, but the share is much higher. Same thing with Samsung, same thing. So I think managed trade is the way forward because everybody's doing it. We have no choice.
Yeah.
Everybody else is managing their trade. If the numbers that I saw would suggest that if Germany was allocating investment dollars, they would not build their new factory in Europe. Okay, South Carolina is a lot cheaper. Okay, but then Africa is cheaper than South Carolina, right? But they still invest a considerable amount in Europe and Germany, despite that fact. Okay, well, that tells me that there's something going on in the allocation besides economics. And I would challenge that. I would say your number is going to be different because obviously your number is different today, not based on economics. And, I think that's clear that it's German government protects their manufacturers for jobs. In return, what the German companies have to do is keep jobs domestic.
Yeah. Okay.
And we have to challenge. We have to say, look, if we're going to buy this many cars from you, we want a bigger share of that, and we want some of that. Exports as well. Some of those cars you send on to China and so on. So, and I think that's how you have to move forward. And the problem is that you have some partners that are not going to cooperate. I think it's somewhat ironic. We buy so much from China, but Tesla is not exporting cars, or it might be right now, but the plan is to have Chinese production of Tesla's already started, right? So, the plant was already built in California. Why couldn't we expand it and export to China without tariffs? Because we're buying all this stuff. Well, he has to compete against, Elon Musk has to compete against very cheap labor in China. So if he wants to sell in the China market, he's got to produce in China. Well, if they can do that, I can do that here.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
what's the saying? What's good for the goose is good for the gander, or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. So do a few deals like that if you can get it done, working with the various parties in their individual interests, and bring back,
Yeah.
get a few deals done like that. Next thing you know, we've got
The
quite a
problem
bit more
is
jobs
the
here.
problem is that that's just like I said. There's the yesterday problem, which is cars and things like that. There's the future problem. We have to make sure that we're not creating. The thing about regulation and all these things. Sometimes you regulate, you you have secondary and tertiary effects that you don't quite understand at the time. So you have to be very cognizant of that. You don't want our companies to be so reliant on protectionism that their product no longer protects the product competitive.
Yes.
This is why the Mercedes is so much nicer than the best thing that Ford has to offer, is because Mercedes making so much money off their cars, they could invest more in production and research and so on. And so you can't have that. We gotta have a fair playing field, but the companies have to do their part. If they don't, they should be allowed to fail. Protectionism should not be the way to keep companies from doing what they're supposed to. So that's why I hate solving it in that direction. But you have to start thinking that way, because that's what the other countries, and for better or for worse, I think that's the future.
Yep.
We're going to see more managed trade. Um, yeah, because clearly the Chinese, the reason we cooperated with the Chinese for many years was that there was big hope that, as they become more reliant on us, they will open up their economy and even open up politically and have more of freedoms of expression and speech in their own country. Well, that hope is gone. Nobody
Yeah.
has that hope anymore, not even the most naive person. So now it just becomes a trading entity that's going to oppose you just about all the time. But now you got to deal with the consequence of the fact that you've let countries like that now serve on the UN Human Rights Commission. Talk about bizarre, right? I mean, China on the UN Human Rights Commission. What world is this? Are we in a fiction novel or something? You know? So I mean, they got Muslims in detention camps. They've got people have no rights, and like, come on,
Yep.
So that's the system that we're in. It's not a very good starting, but that's the starting point. You have to accept it, move on, and do what matters. Bring the jobs, shut the door when you need.
It's Friday night, and I know it's after 5, so
There
we'll
you
get
go.
you out of here soon. But what is the way forward with China? I mean, we have kind of created this monster now.
Yeah, I think that you just have to, like with regimes like Iran and China, you just have to let them fail on their own. Just don't empower them to stay in power and oppress their own people. And that's the problem with trading with entities. Is that maybe it's not our way, or it's not right for us to dictate to how the Chinese should do what they do. Okay, I'll accept that. But by trading with the current power, you're enabling them to stay in power over their people. So you can't. There's no escaping. So I think it's sad, but it's true. I mean, buying oil from Arab countries that were, like Iran and so on, was not good for the people. They oppressed their own people. But in the end, I'm hopeful, because I see these governments that do this to their people. They are failing. Eventually, they fail, and the problem is building something better afterwards. Much harder than we think. Sometimes the new government is not better.
Right. Yeah.
That's the next step. We have to figure out how to do that. But they are failing left and right, because they're not addressing the needs of their people. And the internet, thanks to the phone, the smartphone, is showing them how other countries are living. You can no longer lie to them.
So do you see some sort of an uprising happening in China in the coming years?
It's hard to say. I don't have a special talent. but I think that the current Xi is in power permanent, and that's going to eventually wear its welcome. The other people in the party that are being left out or being investigated or whatever, they're going to have something to say eventually. I don't see it as a situation that's in equilibrium.
Oh, okay.
How
Okay.
long will that take? I mean, in China, they measure things by hundreds of years.
Yeah.
I'm not willing to make that bet in my lifetime.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
but you know, and some of it has to do with the West. How the West acts to them, acts towards them, will determine how long they stay in power. I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
they made a deal with their people. We create jobs, we improve your standard of living, and you give us power, and you don't complain about anything. That's the well. They can't satisfy the first goal. They don't get what the people are going to have an
Yep.
uprising.
Yep.
You know? The important thing, though, is we can't control that. To a certain extent, we can make a choice whether to trade with them. We can't accept that. But we can and should be very cognizant of the fact that we can't let that spread to the rest of. We can't let their influence spread to Taiwan, Singapore, because that's what they want.
Mm-hmm.
That can't happen.
Mm.
That's the end of us, because then we would have no influence in the region, and we would have let a lot of people. The good thing about it, that they are their own worst enemy. India all of a sudden wants to cuddle up. Okay, Australia has finally had it. Right, Taiwan wants to buy arms from us and make deals on how to. So it's an American moment.
Mm-hmm.
And its reason it's an American moment is because we are the hopes and dreams of the sons and daughters of all those countries. They came to this country and created it. It's the best pitch,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what everybody wants. So we just have to be aware of that and remind our children.
Yeah.
Not to be bombastic and patriotic or whatever, but it's out of an obligation to the human race.
Yep.
And while we're at it, protect those freedoms here so that they're not chipped away, so that the FBI can come in your house at any time or spy on you at any time or do all these things that were so against what the Constitution had in mind.
Yes. Last thing. What do you expect for inflation in the next 5 to 10 years here, based on our deficit and how we're printing money? Do you expect to see inflation rampant?
No. There will be some assets that will go up in price, and some of it will be viewed as appreciation, but when it's really inflation, such as real estate, such financial assets. But we don't have inflation. Printing money is not sufficient to cause inflation, especially in a reserve currency. Now, failure of a currency is totally different. That's not inflation. That's a failure. That's like 6,000% inflation. That's not what we're talking about. I think that the United States is very, very far from that. Some of it has to do with the fact that the debt ratio is still reasonable. Some of it has to do is that we have a military that can defend itself, defend the country, and that means that actually means that you can't be taken over, which is a big deal for your currency, because normally when you're taken over your currency. So no, I think inflation. I wish we could get some modest, consistent inflation, but we're not. We're going to see inflation in certain assets I mentioned earlier that have had inflation in the past, but the trend is towards a lot of deflation, and then there's some inflation in some things. So we're treading water or slightly inflation, but I don't see. You said 5 to 10 years. I'm comfortable with that.
Okay.
What happens after that? Harder to predict. But look, I mean, Japan has a lot of debt, and they have their population doesn't grow anywhere near as much as the United States, and they've I think that the problem that we mentioned earlier is that we don't have enough demand for inflation. You have money chasing capital goods. Too much money chasing the same goods will cause. The problem is we don't have the demand.
I see.
We're producing capacity. Most factories are producing capacity at 70, 80%, and they can produce a lot more before there's inflation. They're having a hard time selling what they got. We don't have excess capacity.
Mm.
We don't have too little capacity.
Mhm.
So actually, we have too much capacity, excess capacity. So the problem isn't capacity, or it's the demand. The demand side of the equation is failing. It started failing in the 70s. So the way to solve that was to find four markets. And American companies did that very well. Most S&P 500 companies, I think as a whole, the S&P derives about 40% of its sales from overseas. So we went overseas and sold them our product as part of a reaction to grow up. So we did it, right? So the problem is there's insufficient demand now going forward, and that's what you need to have. You need to have basically a supply shortage, where all of a sudden,
Okay.
like you're seeing in housing in certain markets, like
I
you
see.
see in education, subsidized, things like that. So there are pockets of inflation, but as a whole, it's a problem. We need more of it.
Yep. Well, this is great. It was a lot
All
of
right.
fun.
We're going to finish on inflation.
Yeah. Anything else you wanted to hit?
No, thank you. I enjoyed it.
Thank you, Fadi. This is
Thanks.
fantastic. A pleasure, as always. Have a good weekend.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know what I just did here.
Yeah, it was fun.
Ah,
It's
all right.
great. Oh, let me get a picture of you real
How
quick.
long is this?
So we're at 2.5 hours.
Oh.